If dreams could take shape, they might very well be colored red, have 4 wheels, 12 cylinders, and the name Ferrari stamped indelibly on them, as indelibly as it has been stamped on generations of racing enthusiasts.
Any driver, his aim is to go one day in the Scuderia Ferrari.
With the establishment of the Formula One Grand Prix World Championship in 1950, it became in the world appearance, competition, and drama. Ferrari is more than a name and a car. Ferrari is a man. He was born in Modena, Italy in 1898, the same year the world land speed record was first established at just over 40 miles per hour. His father wanted him to be an engineer, but he had hopes of being an opera singer, or a sporto racing also lurked in the back of his mind. The reality of quitting school at the age of 13 and shoeing mules for the Italian army blew away his early dreams. After the armistice, he began frequenting the haunts enjoyed by the motor racing crowd and soon worked as a test driver, then as an actual race driver with CMN in 1919. If racing was not Ferrari's first vocation, it was his first success. He placed well in a number of races and drew the attention of the pole star of auto racing in the 1920s, Alfa Romeo. Ferrari joined Alfa at the start of the decade, and the relationship lasted in one form or another for nearly 20 years. Although his driving career prospered, Ferrari also felt an urge to take a more active role in the development and engineering of the vehicles he drove. It was then that Ferrari's great organizational genius was first noticed, the quality that was to become the bedrock of his success. It was a rare occasion when Ferrari took time out to relax, as he became more and more absorbed in his dream. In the 1920s, Enzo Ferrari won 12 races for Alfa, a figure that does not fully indicate his ability, because as technical problems commanded more of his time, he competed only sporadically. Ferrari took a step closer to his ultimate dream in 1929 by leaving Alfa Romeo and forming his own racing stable, or Scuderia. Although a separate entity, the Scuderia Ferrari was in effect an autonomous division of the Alfa company, racing its cars exclusively and feeding back key technological information to the manufacturer. As Alfa withdrew from racing, the Scuderia became the semi-official competition arm of the firm, acquiring its best engineers and drivers. The new team was the racing success of the 30s, dueling with ferocious competition from Bugatti and Maserati of Italy and Germany's Auto Union and Mercedes-Benz on equal terms. During that period, Ferrari developed many of the concepts of automotive design that are still bearing fruit today. Ferrari also assembled a stable of drivers that was the envy of the racing world. Giuseppe Campari, Guy Moll, Rudolf Caracciola, Nino Farina, Alberto Ascari, Achille Varzi, and the giant of them all, Tazio Nuvolari. Ferrari never considered himself a designer or inventor, but someone who got things moving and kept them running. The Scuderia was enormously successful, and Enzo Ferrari's ability to kindle competitive fire in his drivers made him paramount among team managers.
Well, you know, Mr. Ferrari is how could I say, he's a sort of a pope of the racing.
In the high-speed, highly charged atmosphere of auto racing, strains inevitably develop, and Ferrari and Alfa Romeo ended their association in 1939. I returned to Modena, he said, to prove that during my 20 years with Alfa, not all my reputation was second-hand and gained by the efforts and skills of others. The time had come to see just how far I could get on my own.
I had tremendous respect for him, because, as indeed I had for the team, but of course he was the team, and he was the old autocratic type of dictator, and that, I think, is a setup you need to be successful in motor racing. You cannot have a successful team run by a committee.
For over half a century, the prancing stallion has symbolized the fighting spirit that underlies the Ferrari legend.
Quindi un uomo di una personalità molto spiccata, un uomo di una vitalità, un uomo che è entrato nella mitologia, quindi un uomo che ha creato dal niente una grossa azienda.
Qual è stata la sua filosofia di disegno delle sue macchine?
Direi più che una fisonomia, io mi sono riportato alla prima impressione che ebbi nel 1919 di una vettura americana che aveva corso ad Indianapolis e che era la Packard 12 cilindri. Da quel momento ho sposato il motore a 12 cilindri e non ho più divorziato.
Immediately after the Second War, Ferrari reactivated the Scuderia, but this time to build and race his own cars bearing his name, with, of course, 12-cylinder motors. Along with engineers Gioacchino Colombo and Aurelio Lampredi, he created his dream engine. It was that engine that stunned Alfa and the rest of the racing world by recording the first ever 100-mile-an-hour lap at Silverstone while practicing for the 1951 British Grand Prix. The race was decided when the Alfas had to pit for fuel. Blasting through the pack, Pepe Gonzalez added the Grand Prix to the record, giving Ferrari his first victory. As Enzo Ferrari had helped create the Alfas beaten that day, he said, "I have killed my mother."
Che motivo gli ha fatto decidere di costruire la sua propria macchina da corsa?
Semplicemente che io sono stato licenziato dall'Alfa Romeo.
The sacking, forcing Ferrari to build his own cars, was the most constructive move Alfa Romeo ever performed for motor racing. That became apparent in 1952 with the debut of the famed Ferrari 500, the most successful and to many the most beautiful race car ever built. Driven by Alberto Ascari, son of an old Ferrari teammate and friend, the 500 gave him his first world championship. As it had won 7 out of 7 the year before, the 500 was entered unchanged for 1953 when it won the first 7 out of 8. For a car to go from the drawing board to victory in its first 14 races was without precedent and has never been duplicated. One of those drawing boards belonged to engineer Aurelio Lampredi, who designed the engine in a single day of intense creativity and later recalled that Ferrari brought him sandwiches so that work wouldn't stop for a moment. It was again the symbiosis of Ascari and the 500 that afforded Ferrari his second consecutive world championship. At the end of 1953, Alfa was a mere memory, and Ferrari the measure in motor racing. It is essential that any great team anticipate periods of adjustment and change, evolution and revision. 1955 was such a year for Ferrari. Ferrari was running the year-old 625, modified with larger brakes, while it worked on a new generation of racers. It was not considered as any threat to the Germans at Monaco, where the rule was thunderous acceleration out of the corners. The mighty Mercedes had taken the title the previous year, and the sleek silver cars, usually led by Sterling Moss or Juan Manuel Fangio, were to sweep every race in 1955 with one notable exception. Maurice Trintignant, driving the 625, started the 1955 Monaco Grand Prix on the fourth row of the grid and worked his way up through the field to take the checkered flag and put a crack in the Mercedes domination, showing that an off-season for Ferrari is merely one when they don't walk away with the World Championship. The managerial skills gained when Scuderia Ferrari was racing cars made by Alfa paid enormous dividends 2 decades later, when Ferrari took the cars from the disbanded Gianni Lancia team and produced a world championship. With chassis modifications and a power boost to Ferrari standards, the solid machines won half the 8 races on the 1956 race schedule. Juan Manuel Fangio was in the winning car.
La Ferrari ha ingaggiato i piloti che erano disponibili sul mercato, ma oserei dire che non sono le fabbriche che ingaggiano i piloti, ma sono i piloti che scelgono le fabbriche. Difatti i piloti intelligenti vanno sempre dove c'è la macchina vincente. Fangio è un esempio. Per 5 anni ha scelto la macchina migliore.
The Ferrari team has had a number of decisive turning points, and 1958 was one of them. Having gone from 12 cylinders to 4 to 8, Enzo Ferrari finally settled on a V6 called the Dino in honor of his son. Snatching the title from drivers of the quicker but more erratic Van Walls, the steadfast Ferrari took Mike Hawthorne to 5 second placings, a third and a fifth. The founder's principle of rugged reliability never paid higher dividends, winning a world championship, even though the titleist won only 1 race, the French Grand Prix at Reims. For 1959, the most radical change in Grand Prix racing, the rear-engined car. The banked Berlin track encouraged maximum speed, a factor Ferrari had always been noted for. England's Tony Brooks took advantage of it. Brooks was not the only winner at the German Grand Prix that year, as the victim of this spectacular crash walked away from the wreckage. Brooks' victory here in Berlin showed that Ferrari still had top machines and men, though the rear-engine British cars were pointing the way to the future. Put the engine behind you, put the championship ahead of you, they said. But Ferrari was adamant. Horses pull wagons, they don't push them. As an act of defiance, Tony Brooks gave the pulling horses of Ferrari the 1959 German Grand Prix.
It was with considerable regret that I decided to leave Ferrari at the end of 1959, because I could see, as they had a successful 1.5 litre car running that year, that in 1961, when the formula was going to change to 1.5 litres, that the Ferrari would be the car to beat, and in leaving Ferrari, I was giving up a very good chance of a further shot at the World Championship in '61. Of course, subsequently, this proved to be the case. In '61, it was only a question of which Ferrari driver was going to win the World Championship.
The question was settled in favor of Phil Hill, the first American to take the title. When Ferrari finally entered the rear-engine sweepstakes, it did so 2 years after the British, but 2 years better.
Our strongest asset in 1961 was the engine. We did have a definite edge on power, and Ferrari, of course, down through the years, even up to that time, had been famous for being able to get pretty high outputs out of given engine sizes. That was our strongest point. On the other hand, we gave away a fair amount of that advantage to the fact that our chassis weren't anything like as pleasant to drive in the handling department, and they were heavy, and we had to resort to all kinds of trick things like high negative camber angles in the rear wheels that raised holy Ned with the tire manufacturers, who were always at us because our tires were getting up to critical temperatures on the inside rear. often when Moss, for example, could go straight through on rain tires, even on a just slightly damp circuit, we wouldn't have been able to do that because we would have worn the tires out and had to change and therefore have lost infinitely more than what little advantage the rain tire would have given us. The high hysteresis tire would have given us, you see. So it wasn't quite as simple as saying that we had a lot of extra power and that Moss managed to beat us on several occasions in spite of that. It was a give and take situation, but to compare the two is like comparing apples and pears.
As in 1952 and 1958, the Scuderia took their new car and won with it straight out of the box. It decimated the opposition that had presumed Maranello would take at least 2 years to catch up on rear engine technology. In winning 5 of the season's 8 races, Enzo Ferrari had obviously decided that horses could also push cars. Then, in one terrible, wrenching moment for Ferrari, Wolfgang von Trips was dead. It was little compensation that the team took the double constructors' and drivers' titles. And there were more clouds on the horizon. John Surtees joined the team in a period of turmoil. At the end of 1961, Carlo Chitti, Ferrari's chief engineer, left with 7 other senior directors. They set up their own team with an eye to returning to Formula One, although 2 of the fugitives soon returned to the Scuderia. In addition, Enzo Ferrari had to devote most of his energies to fight off the smothering embrace of America's Ford Motor Company. The jilted suitor decided, if you can't join them, beat them, and the Ford Cosworth engine was born. For over a decade, Ferrari was the only non-Cosworth engine on the grid. In typical fashion, Enzo Ferrari merely rolled up his sleeves and waded into the challenge. An Italian journalist noted he got angry, and anger took 10 years off his age. By 1964, he had nothing to be angry about. Once again, Ferrari came out with a brand new model that was to give car and driver world championships the first time out. Sporting the first Ferrari V8, the 158 notched 3 firsts, 3 seconds, and 4 thirds. It also proved the resilience of the founder, who, faced with 3 crushing blows, came back stronger than ever. But that was to be expected of the man who, in 1944, surveyed the rubble of his... If I save anything, there will come the day, I am certain, when I will be able to dedicate myself solely to the construction of racing cars, and that will allow my cars to be raced every Sunday and at the same time. Don't you think that being able to win 2 or 3 times on the same day would be a worthy objective? Defecting engineers and the Ford Motor Company mean very little to a man with that spirit.
Sono molto cambiati. Allora lo sport era predominante. Oggi ci sono molte altre componenti economiche che sacrificano lo sport.
Ferrari has said, I race because I am an enthusiast, whereas others do so as a business. Yet business was very important to him, having created road and sports cars that were the envy of the world to support his passion for his beloved racing machines. After the brilliance of 1964, it required all the passion Ferrari could muster to weather the next few years. The Scuderia was like a fine sailing ship drifting through equatorial doldrums, flashes of lightning on the horizon and the promise of wind ahead, but still adrift.
In my opinion, he was a fighter. He was stronger in the bad moment than in the one in which he was winning races. More strong when he was a loser than was a winner, because he was loving racing.
In the spring of 1969, a cordial marriage was arranged between Ferrari and Italy's Fiat. The massive manufacturer took a majority interest in the minuscule Maranello operation and immediately assumed responsibility for its production cars. This freed Enzo Ferrari to concentrate on and be in complete control of all racing activities. Now that he was again purely in motor racing, was it like the earliest days of the Scuderia?
Direi che è cambiato tutto. sono cambiate le strade, sono cambiati i regolamenti, sono cambiate le consuetudini, sono cambiate le macchine, il mondo ha camminato velocemente, per quanto ritengo che non vi sia niente di nuovo.
In 1974, the tide reversed with a roar, the flying red cars again the standard of excellence in the industry. Most responsible was the new model 312, a product of the close collaboration between engineers Mauro Forghieri, Franco Rocchi and Giancarlo Bussi. Its profile was easily identified by the extreme forward position of the driver and the unusually high air intake behind him. As proof that Maranello was firmly once again a player in the championships, the Scuderia scored 3 wins and 7 second places. Clay Regazzoni was bumped from the World Championship at the final race of the season by the thin margin of 1 point. With teammate Niki Lauda also prominent in the title hunt, 1975 loomed as the full return of the prancing horse.
32-2 abbiamo. Incredibile.
By 1975, the Commendatore, as he had now come to be known, had emerged as the world's most successful figure in motor racing history, with 6 world championships behind him, and had, by choosing the right combination, put the 7th world championship on the horizon. He was back on the comfortable ground of a 12-cylinder engine, the Boxer flat opposed motor. The car was more compact than previous models, and in Niki Lauda, Ferrari had once again found a driver exactly suited to his style. At the Monaco Grand Prix, with 1/3 of the season over, Lauda was a distant 9th in the championship standings. His teammate Regazzoni was just ahead in 7th. Every team to make up for lost time. Reigning world champion Emerson Fittipaldi chewed into Lauda's lead on every lap, waiting for the younger driver to make a mistake. Lauda was making no mistakes that day and established a pattern that would be repeated in his next 3 races. Monaco proved to be the seminal race. Only once before, exactly 20 years earlier, had the Scuderia conquered these narrow city streets. With a similar brilliance, Lauda walked away with the Belgian, Swedish and French Grand Prix. No team can win without grueling hours in the pits and on the test to achieve victory. Meticulous tests, practice at the track, are preceded by even longer hours of testing at the Ferrari track in Maranello. Niki Lauda talks about the track.
Well, the circuit is incredible because we got all the way around the circuit some special equipment to time the car on each part of the circuit. Top speed logic, lap time logic, but each part of the circuit I can have intermediate times. That means if I improve the car on the straight, and I'm slow around the corner, it will show in a big bend which comes out of a machine where I lose and where I gain, so it's quite easy to test cars there.
Ferrari has refused to compromise where safety is concerned. He has said of his car, she is as reliable as is humanly possible.
Mechanically, I'm very happy to drive the Ferrari because I know it is a very safe and strong car. That means no wheels fall off and wings will fall off because the car is built very, very nice, a bit heavy maybe, but very good, very strong.
The final act of the 1975 World Championship was about to be played. There was little to bother the Ferrari team as they headed to the starting grid at Monza. A finish by Lauda within the first 6 places in any of the remaining races would guarantee the championship. Hundreds of thousands of Italian fans at the track felt that victory would come at home. 8 times before, the winner at Monza had become world champion. And so it was to be. The Italian-Swiss Regazzoni played his role in the happy scenario perfectly, winning the Italian Grand Prix in an Italian car. Niki Lauda gave Ferrari and Italy its 7th World Championship.
And I think that right here in 1975, we're seeing a tremendous example of what his kind of tenacity, almost ruthlessness in some people's minds, can accomplish.
Before I leave to a race, he asked me, how many points are you going to make in South Africa? Then I will say 9, commendatore. Then he will say, okay, good lad, go ahead. So when I made 9 points, he says, well done. If I make 6 points or 4 points, he asks me why I didn't make 9 points. And then I tell him, and if he understands, he will say he agrees. If he doesn't, he will say I don't agree.
Do you ever go to any track saying, I don't feel confident that I may make any?
No.
By 1976, the Ferrari-Lauda marriage seemed inviolate, each playing to the other's strength. The Commendatore was already predicting 5 world championships for the Austrian. By the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, a double title for team and driver seemed assured. But there are no guarantees in auto racing. An unexplained accident turned Lauda's car into an inferno and nearly cost him his life. Lauda returned an incredible 6 weeks later, but lost the championship by refusing to race in the Japanese Grand Prix. Mauro Forghieri comments on Ferrari's reaction.
Especially when he was believing that somebody was not doing the maximum to come back in the winning position. So when he realized that somebody was doing the wrong things, not because he was convinced to do the wrong, but because he was not doing the maximum, he was become very furious about that, especially in respect of the drivers, of the engineers and mechanics.
The driver who had carried the Ferrari team to the sun seemed to be in the chill winds of winter as the 1977 season opened in South America. Niki Lauda appeared a pariah to the team, while attention was lavished on Carlos Reutemann, now receiving attention as the #1 driver at Ferrari. The Ferrari 312 T2 was described as transitional, which must have been bad news for those anticipating the T3. The transitional car began the season by winning the Brazilian Grand Prix. Lauda placed 3rd, but still had to overcome Ferrari's prejudice against him with hard results. The first of those hard results was his victory at the South African Grand Prix.
This was the first race where the Ferrari was really running quick again, and I could take the lead. And I remember when I took the lead, I was very happy.
Once Lauda and Ferrari found their rhythm at South Africa, the season was effectively over. The Austrian had come back from a near-fatal accident to take the driving championship for Enzo Ferrari, a man who was no stranger to the fight for survival. Ferrari was now approaching 80, and his 8th World Championship would have provided the perfect curtain call for his retirement, which was absolutely the last thing on his mind. As expected, the 312S T3 was an evolutionary car and won 4 races in 1978. But the revolutionary ground effect cars won all the rest. Ground effect was an aerodynamic innovation that allowed negative airflow under the car to pin it to the ground. Years earlier, with rear engines, did not have it. Ever one to fly in the face of convention, Ferrari entered 1979 with the T4, not a ground effects machine, but not without some aspects of negative lift, achieved through harmonizing external airflows. That might sound like a voodoo headache cure, but it worked well enough to give Enzo Ferrari championship for car and driver. The 1979 season was like the best of Ferrari years, overpowering. It saw the re-entry of Alfa Romeo in Grand Prix for the first time since 1952. The team that had sacked Enzo Ferrari didn't score a single championship point during the season. Their former employee amassed a record 113 in gathering up his 9th World Championship. At Monza, Jody Scheckter led Gilles Villeneuve across the finish line. It was exactly how they would finish in the driving championship. It was the 9th victory on home ground for the Scuderia, far more than any other team, and a particular delight to Enzo Ferrari and millions of his dedicated Italian supporters. A fitting way to end 3 decades of Grand Prix success.
When you are a leader, you are complicated. You can be normal. If you are normal, you are not a leader. He was a leader of racing world.
Enzo Ferrari entered the world before the word aerodynamics entered the vocabulary. Yet when cars became so fast they were creating their own barriers of disturbed air, Ferrari was quick to seek the wind tunnel to make his machines as aerodynamically slippery as possible. Although intensely active in engineering innovation, the use of disc brakes, rear engines, aerodynamic wings, ground effects or turbocharging, more often arriving behind the competition. It was his philosophy to wait until he had perfected the new technology before introducing it for the sake of introducing it. As he proved with the rear engine, he could start 2 years behind and wind up 2 years ahead.
Qual è la macchina la più importante che lei ha costruito?
Quella che devo ancora costruire.
In the motor racing world, the launch of a new Ferrari Grand Prix entrant causes more excitement than the premiere of a new film in Hollywood. Maranello's concept of endless improvement guarantees to the press that the new car will not be a cosmetic rehash of the previous model, but a new step in the Scuderia's progress. Launch of the Ferrari 126 C4 in 1984 was typical, the press flocking to Maranello from all over the globe. When the press had gone home, the real work on the new car begins at Maranello. Wind tunnels, computers, dynamometers, bench tests, theories cannot work when it hits the pavement. It has to be tested. In short, it has to be driven. At its elaborate test track adjacent to the factory, the Scuderia stages endless trials to determine whether the theoretical calculations translate physically into a world championship contender. Always in the background, always looking over the shoulder, was Enzo Ferrari. Mauro Forghieri discusses the man who was peering at his work.
You know, was a man able to put in the team a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of, you know, he was convinced to people to be believer in the result. So he wasn't, honestly, working with him behind the shoulder was easier, I think, that without him. Because he was a, how can I say, a sure point. You know, when we go back after a bad race, maybe he was able to be familiar with us, but immediately after to be like a father, you know, giving us convention to keep on and to try to do our best.
It is vital to have the driver constantly working the kinks out of the car, but all his testing would be worthless if he couldn't communicate the car's performance and problems to the engineers. Ferrari has had many great drivers and many great engineers, but if they were not tuned to each other, the result was silence. With Enzo Ferrari, who described himself as a troublemaker, there was always, again, beat a path to the door at Maranello in 1985 for the launch of the 156. Even those who keep careful score of the number of Grand Prix prototypes Ferrari has introduced cannot agree on which was a completely new design and what was an improvement on an existing car. But at least 25 cars have made their debut since 1950, which is extremely modest compared to the more than 150 engines he has built over the same period. Press interest in a new Ferrari launch is enhanced by the knowledge that with Ferrari in deep, unique among racing teams, the engine and transmission and most components came from the same group of designers from the same factory. Ferrari makes the total car. Whatever the activity at Maranello, Enzo Ferrari was always there, hovering just out of focus, self-effacing to the public, but very much the presence and the power inside the Scuderia.
Quel serait le conseil que vous donneriez, vous, Monsieur Ferrari, à un jeune homme qui voudrait s'engager dans la compétition automobile aujourd'hui? Quel conseil lui donneriez-vous?
C'est difficile. Come padre dovrei dire di no. Come sportivo direi di sì se egli un talento naturale. Sono due questioni molto separate.
Mais de conseils spécialement de s'orienter?
Nessuno. Se uno è un talento può fare il corridore. Lo dice, bisogna essere piloti.
The ironic to the factory is that it affords the unrivaled opportunity to test at the Scuderia and the availability of the car. That racing is essential. The auto, it continues on its upward path of any real endorsed empirical experiment. It is precisely racing that forces the driver to be programmed, or because they are irritated by the requirements he finds himself in. These situations and circumstances with ordinary cars, Ferraris, climates, and in testing, the cars usually cover a full race distance, doing up to encountered during competition.
Evolvendo diventa sempre più uno spettacolo, quello ha le sue esigenze.
Ma lo spirito è cambiato?
Lo spirito, io credo che oggi ci sia l'elemento interesse che domina molte decisioni. Una volta c'era la passione pura.
Motor cars had intoxicated it. He was always more concerned with the future than the very comfortable and rewarding present. As he said in his own memoirs, I should like to put something new into my cars every morning, an inclination that terrifies my staff, who hasten to service to tomorrow's customer, but would stand still. Were my wishes in this respect to be indulged, there would be no production at all, but only a succession of prototypes. Ferrari engineers have always known a great deal of pressure from the man who likes to stir things, attracted the best and the brightest from Italy and abroad. There is not only the prestige of working for the Scuderia, of taking what is often the best racing car in the world and improving upon it, and then improving on that. As Ferrari observed, seem to find each other. The famed Cavallino restaurant immediately across to host in meeting the Enzo Ferrari conduct or misconduct of Grand Prix racing, the governing body, the FIA, and diametrically resolved their differences.
Di salutare oggi a Maranello, il nuovo Concorde, che di 2 anni il cammino della auguro prosperità e Presidente Jean-Marie a Bernie Eccles loro, per il nostro Cinini, costruttiva de l'automobile au pape du sport automobile.
The red car appearances to Enzo Ferrari racing in June 1988. It had been rolled out for a man who had never driven a motor car in his life. Pope John Paul II paid a papal visit to the Scuderia to underline the stature of Ferrari, Italy, and as Enzo Ferrari lay stricken with his final illness, he could be comforted by the warmth of being that rare human who had seen his dream come true. Earlier, Ferrari had said that he was honored by accomplishing all he had set out to do. The mothers who were able to interpret car in history, 1,000 races in every likes of Fed. It is doubtful that a pope ever visited a car plant in Detroit. Ferrari will continue. Played by Enzo Ferrari has left an impetus. After his death, the legacy is already firm.
Quel est votre secret pour garder cette jeunesse aussi longtemps? Merci.
Alive. Enzo Ferrari has said, I have no real interest. The Ferrari is the fate is to agree once in our purpose.
I believe him is still alive.